Hi guys, this is your girl Wakeji Kamore and welcome to Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. So today we are going to be looking at the story that is in 2 Kings chapter 5. Please, if you haven't read the chapter, kindly pause, read the chapter and then come back to the recording. If you're here for the very first time, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you do not miss any future recording. All right, so this story in the book of 1 Kings chapter 5 is the story of the healing of Naaman, how Elisha was used to heal Naaman of leprosy. All right, let's continue from there. So it says that King Aram, who at this point was a king in Syria, or rather who used to be in Syria, had a commander of his army, and the commander of his army was Naaman. And he had such great admiration for him because he has been Naaman was such a great warrior. He had brought a lot of great victories for their army, but he suffered from leprosy. Please note, at that time, leprosy was like the deadliest disease that you could suffer from. And it was like one of those diseases where people just used to stay away from you. But apparently, Naaman had been able to navigate around it and still had become one of the greatest commanders of the Syrian army. All right, so at this point where they had raided they had raided some Arameans, and they had captured like some young girls, and one of the young girls had become like a slave for Naaman's wife. So one day the young girl said, "I wish my master would go and see the prophet in Samaria, then he would be healed of his leprosy." So Naaman heard of that and said, "Okay, let me just go to the king and tell the king what this servant in my house has said." So he went to the king of Aram, and rather his boss. The boss was the king of Aram. He went to his boss and said, "Okay, so now there is this. Apparently, if I go to see a prophet in Samaria, I can be healed." So King of Aram wrote an introduction letter to the king of Israel and said, "This is Naaman, my servant. Please heal him out of leprosy." So first he addresses this letter to the king. I don't know why he's addressing this letter to the king and asking the king to heal Naaman. The girl was very specific. "I wish you would go and see the prophet in Samaria," not the king, but the prophet. But also this king of Aram, I may address letter for king of Israel instead of king of the king, telling the king to help Naaman find the prophet. Anyway, so Naaman takes with himself 750 pounds of silver, 100 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. So he went to Israel and he gave the king of Israel the letter, and the king was like, "Am I God that I can give life and take it away? Why is this man asking me to heal someone with leprosy? I can see that he's just trying to pick a fight with me." So the king of Israel was like, "Okay, get hii letter. Kwa nini naambiwa nihilu mse? Mi si healingi watu." So unfortunately for Naaman, Elisha heard of this story and was like, "Why are you so upset? Send Naaman to me and he will learn that there's a true prophet here in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elisha sent a messenger out to him with the message, "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored and you will be healed of your leprosy." All right, let's pause there. So Naaman and all his chariots and all the 70 pounds of silver he's carrying, 100 pounds of gold, 10 sets of clothing, his chariots, his horses, now they are standing outside Elisha's house. Instead of Elisha coming out, Elisha sends a messenger. He tells the messenger, "Enda waambie huyo Naaman mwenye amesimama hapo nje." He goes and doofs himself in the Jordan River. Go and swim, go and dip yourself into the Jordan River 7 times, then you'll be healed. But of course, Naaman, as the great commander of army, is very offended because it's like, this guy is going to send me an assistant, atanitumia intern, ananitumia messenger. Like, he's not going to actually come here and talk to me. So he became very angry and started to walk away, and he said, "I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call the name of the Lord his God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, the Abana and the Farfar better than any of the rivers in Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed. So Naaman went away in range. Sasa amekasirika kwa sababu he was not welcomed by Prophet Elisha himself. He's been just given a message by a messenger. But his officers, the officers of Naaman, who are like, oh, please, Naaman. Please, they reasoned with him. They said, Aki, please just go and dip yourself for 7 times. Because if this prophet asked you to do something difficult, you would have done it. Not that he's asked you to do something simple. Just go and do it. So Naaman went down to Jordan River. And he dipped himself 7 times. I don't know whether he was dipping himself, coming out to the shore, dipping himself again, coming out. Dipping, I don't know whether he was just like standing, dipping himself, standing, dipping. Sijui. But he dipped himself 7 times as the man of God had instructed him, and his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child. First, let me tell you, if someone gives me the skin of a young child, amta breathe. Ukuzile myself nitawatumia. You will not breathe. So, Naaman is healed. So he's like, oh, okay, this thing worked. So him and his entire party, this is chariots and horses and all the things that he's carried, they went back to find the man of God. And they stood before him and they said, now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. So please accept the gifts that I have for you. But Elisha was like, no, I will not accept any gifts. Naaman was like urging him, please receive. And Elisha refused. And that was like, he said, Miss Chukui gifts. So it was like, okay, fine. So he said, Naaman said, from now on, I will never again offer burnt offerings or sacrifice to any other God except the Lord. But then he said, however, may the Lord pardon me in this one thing. When my master the king goes into the temple of the god Rimmon, which is an idol god, to worship there, and leans on my hand, may the Lord pardon me when I bow too. So first, Naaman is healed. He's trying to give gifts to Elisha. Elisha has refused. And then Naaman said, okay, before the thing for I will not worship other gods, he says, I'm going to carry 2 loads of soil from this place and take it back home with me. So probably he believed that maybe the soil in Israel, the soil where Elisha was staying, was powerful. Like he had some sort of superstition things. And so he said he's going to carry the soil back home. But then again, he says he will never worship me. He's not going to offer burnt offerings or sacrifices to any other god except the Lord. However, he's making an excuse for himself. He's saying, Nikienda, because I have a boss, which is King Aram. And this King Aram is worshipping an idol god called God Rimmon. I don't know why they couldn't just get one idol god. There are so many. They could just get one. There are so many to keep up with. So God Rimmon. So King Aram was worshipping God Rimmon. So Naaman is saying, when this king, my boss, goes to worship and he leans on my hand when he's going down, maybe kneeling and whatever, please don't, like, God anisamehe too, because I will have to bow down. Like, that's just what is expected. I can't just stand there and the king is bowing down and kneeling and doing whatever they do to worship King Rimmon. And then Elisha was like, imagine it is okay, go in peace. So he was allowed to go in peace. So remember that he has refused to take the gifts. Elisha has refused to take the gifts. But now there's this guy called Gehazi. Gehazi is a servant of Elisha. Sasa sijui kama ndio messenger mwenye alitumwa akaambie Naaman akaoge kwa maji. I don't know like whether he's the actual messenger, but he used to work under Elisha. So he told himself, my master should not have let the Aramean get away without accepting any of his gifts. So he decided in his heart that he's going to go after Naaman and go and take those gifts for himself and receive them for himself. So he went all the way, he ran after him, he climbed on his chariot and he went and said, oh, my master has sent me. He went and decided he's going to lie about how Elisha has sent him. My master has sent me. There are some 2 young prophets that have come and that we would like 75 pounds of silver and some 2 sets of clothing to give to them. So of course Naaman was very excited that finally Elisha amekubali kupeana gift. So he gave him twice as much of what he was asked. He was given sets of clothes, he was given bags, he was given servants, he was given most of the gifts that, probably half of the gifts that were supposed to go to Elisha that he had refused. So Gehazi took the gifts from the servants and sent the man back, and then he went and took all the gifts and put them inside his house and hid them there. And then he was asked by Elisha, Umetoka wapi? And then he said, oh, I've been everywhere. And then Elisha says, don't you realize that I was there in spirit when Naaman stepped down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to receive money and clothing and olive groves and vineyards and sheep and cattle and male and female servants? Because you have done this, you and your descendants will suffer from Naaman's leprosy forever. So when Gehazi left the room, he was covered with leprosy and his skin was as white as snow. Meaning he had boils, he had pus coming out of him. That is why he was white as snow. So his greed ended up in a total disaster. So what is it that we can learn from this chapter? First, one of the things that I learned is that don't allow your accomplishments and status to make you so proud that you miss out on your breakthroughs and blessings. Naaman could have missed out on his healing because he was so proud, because he was like the commander in army of the whole of Israel. Sasa munamsho nini? So actually the whole of Syria, not Israel, but he was the commander of army. He had a good job, he had victories, he had a great status. So he was like, now you're telling me to go and dip myself. And then now it's not even the fact that you're telling me to go and dip myself in the water. You are sending a messenger to come and tell me this. And then you're telling me to go and dip myself in the water. Don't let your accomplishments and status and title and the money that you have, the degrees that you have, anything that you have, make you so proud that you miss out on the breakthroughs that God has for you and the blessings that God has for you. Don't be over there saying, but me, I'm a director. Mimi niende nikaosha kanisa. Me, I be an usher. Excuse me. Do you know who I am? Do you know how many employees I have? Then you're telling me to go and usher in church. You're telling me to go and serve people tea. You're telling me to go and go to do what? Don't let your accomplishment and status make you so proud that you miss out on your breakthroughs and blessings. Number 2, one of the things that I learned is that first, Naaman made a step to the right direction with his obedience, finally after being convinced and reasoned with and urged and begged by his officers, he actually made the right step to the right direction. He obeyed. And then he had this declaration to worship the true God after his healing. But his faith was nowhere near perfect. Honestly, it wasn't. He was very young in this thing called faith that he didn't understand everything. I mean, the guy carried soil from Israel to Syria. Meaning, he thought in some way that the soil was powerful. He didn't really know that it was God. It wasn't the soil. It has nothing to do with soil. It has nothing to do even with Elisha. It is just God who is powerful. It's just the God of Israel. So his faith was not perfect. And also, he was still going to be bowing to the God of Rimmon because his boss expected him to. His faith was not perfect. Yet, in the book of Luke chapter 4 verse 27, it says, and there were many in Israel with leprosy in the time of Elisha the prophet, yet not one of them was cleansed, only Naaman the Syrian. There were many people who had leprosy in Israel where Elisha actually was located. Like when Elisha alikuwa naishi, there were so many people who had leprosy. But the only person who was healed in that time of Elisha, of a leprosy, was a Syrian man called Naaman. Naaman had to leave another town or another nation. I don't know whether it's a country or me, honestly. Geography 0. Me, because geography is, let's just say geography 0. So, I don't know whether it's a nation or it's a town, but Naaman had to leave a different location, come to where the prophet who had all the powers to heal people was situated and be healed, yet all the men there that had leprosy, none of them was healed. Because his faith, because of Naaman's faith, even if it was not perfect, even if haikuwa perfect, kwanza alikasirika, akabembelezwa, but he still obeyed and still went and dipped himself in the water. So God works with faith. Even when it's not perfect, God honors obedience. And the faith that Naaman demonstrated and the steps that Naaman made to the right direction, God honors obedience, even when it's not perfect. So just imagine how it would be if it was perfect obedience. Like if God told you do this and you're like, yay, and you went and did it. It would be amazing. But God is so gracious that he actually honors every step we make to the right direction. The last lesson that I learned from this is one little sin can cause dire consequences for you and your generation to come. I mean, look at Gehazi's greed. Gehazi sounded like a really nice guy before greed overcame him. So now his greed is gone and picked gifts that was not supposed to be picked. He went and lied that it was Elisha who had sent him. He went and lied to Elisha as well. Now his greed has caused him and his descendants to get leprosy. So don't allow greed to be the driving force of your life. Please don't allow greed to drive your life. All right, thank you so much for listening. This has been your girl Wakeji Kamore, and this is Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. See you tomorrow.